The sun was low behind thick clouds as the transport ship landed on the dusty ground. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and metal. Ethan stepped down from the ramp, his boots sinking slightly into the dirt. He had been sent from a far human colony, and this was his first time meeting soldiers born on Earth. He had heard stories about them, but now he was here to fight beside them. A group of Earth soldiers waited near the landing area. Their armor was worn but well cared for, and their faces showed no fear. Jack, a tall man with sharp eyes, stepped forward to greet him. Beside him stood Lisa, her hair tied back, her expression calm but alert. Ben was checking his rifle, and Claire was organizing crates of supplies. Ethan felt out of place, his own gear newer and cleaner than theirs. Jack gave him a short nod. "You're with us now," he said. His voice was steady, like someone who had been through too many battles to be shaken easily. Ethan followed them toward the camp. It was built from metal panels and sandbags, with a wide view of the barren land around them. In the distance, flashes of light marked where the fight was already raging. Everyone moved with purpose. Soldiers loaded ammunition, repaired equipment, and reinforced the defenses. Ethan noticed how the Earth soldiers worked together without needing to speak much. They seemed to know what each other needed before words were said. There was a quiet bond among them, built from trust earned in the worst places. The ground shook with a distant explosion. Ethan glanced toward the horizon, where dark smoke curled upward. Jack noticed his look. "That's closer than it should be," Jack said. "They'll be here before night." Lisa came over and handed Ethan a pack of extra ammunition. "Keep it close," she said. Her eyes held a steady focus, as if she had already accepted the fight that was coming. She did not waste words. Ben checked the defenses along the wall, his hands moving quickly as he adjusted a mounted gun. Claire called out orders to the medics, her voice firm. Ethan walked with Jack along the barricades. The land stretched far in every direction, but the open ground also meant no place to hide. If the enemy came, they would see them long before they reached the camp. Jack explained the plan in simple terms. "We hold here. We make them pay for every step. No one breaks." The sun sank lower, turning the clouds a dull red. Soldiers gathered their weapons and checked their armor. Ethan felt the air grow colder. Quiet before battle was worse than the fight itself. Every sound seemed louder. The click of a gun, the rustle of gear, the slow crunch of boots on dirt. He remembered the warnings from the officers back home. They said Earth soldiers were fierce, unpredictable, and dangerous even to their allies if crossed. Now, standing here among them, Ethan began to understand. It was not madness in their eyes, but something harder. It was the knowledge that nothing could be worse than losing. Jack stood at the front of the camp, scanning the horizon. Ben joined him, setting up the heavy gun. Lisa took position beside Ethan, her rifle ready. Claire stayed near the medical tent, but kept a pistol on her hip. The camp was silent except for the low wind. As darkness crept over the land, the first sounds came, distant thuds, growing closer. Then the faint glimmer of movement far away. Ethan's breath caught. This was it. Jack raised his hand, signaling everyone to hold. They waited, still as stone, until the shapes drew nearer. The enemy moved like a shadow across the land. The ground trembled again, this time with the rhythm of many feet. Ethan gripped his weapon tighter, his heart pounding. Lisa's voice was low, but clear. "Don't break. Follow their lead." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Hold the line." The camp was ready. The soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, weapons aimed, faces set. The air was thick with tension, but no one stepped back. Ethan stood among them, the heat of fear in his chest, and realized that whatever came next would change him forever. The first clash came with a roar that shook the walls. Flashes of light cut through the darkness as the enemy poured across the open ground. Jack's voice rang out over the gunfire. "Hold your fire until they're close." Soldiers waited, their weapons steady. Ethan felt sweat on his palms. The sounds grew louder, the shadows racing toward them. Then Jack gave the order, and the night exploded in noise. Rifles cracked, heavy guns thudded, and the air filled with smoke. The recoil jolted Ethan's shoulder, but he kept firing. Lisa was beside him, her shots sharp and precise. She moved with a calm rhythm, reloading without looking down. Ben's heavy gun tore through the enemy ranks, the barrels glowing red from the heat. Claire moved between the barricades, and the medical tent, pulling wounded back without hesitation. The enemy pushed hard, their numbers thick, but the humans held the line. Ethan saw how Jack directed the fight. He didn't just give orders, he read the battlefield, shifting men and women to where the pressure was strongest. Lisa covered him every time he moved, her aim unshakable. A sudden blast threw dirt into the air, knocking Ethan to the ground. He coughed and scrambled back to his feet. Lisa glanced at him. "Stay low, keep firing." Her voice was steady, but her eyes stayed locked on the fight. The first wave began to falter under the steady fire. Ben shouted over the noise, "Reload." The team worked as one, no hesitation. When the enemy pulled back to regroup, Jack ordered everyone to check ammo and reinforce the wall. There was no celebration, only the knowledge that another wave would come. The camp was lit by scattered fires, shadows dancing over tired faces. Claire moved quickly, her hands stained from tending the injured. She refused to stop, even when her own arm was cut by flying debris. Ethan offered to help, but she shook her head. "You keep fighting, I'll keep them alive." Jack called a quick meeting by the central barricade. "They're testing us. Next time, they'll come harder. We hold the line here no matter what." His words were simple, but everyone understood. They were outnumbered, but they would not break. Ethan noticed something in the way the Earth soldiers prepared. They didn't just check their weapons. They adjusted the barricades, moved supply crates, and kept an eye on each other. There was a quiet trust between them that came from surviving fights like this before. He felt like an outsider, but also part of something unshakable. The night stretched on, and the second wave came with even greater force. The enemy charged in tight formation, their weapons cutting bright lines through the smoke. Jack barked orders. Lisa shifted position to cover weak points, and Ben's gun roared again. The fight turned brutal. The barricades shook under the impact. Ethan fired until his rifle was hot, then switched to another weapon from the supply crates. He barely had time to think. Lisa was a constant presence at his side, moving like she had fought this battle 100 times. At one point, the enemy breached a section of the wall. Jack rushed to meet them, his rifle firing in short bursts. Ethan followed, and together they pushed them back with close-range fire. Ben covered their retreat with a wall of bullets. Claire was already there, pulling a wounded soldier out of the gap. When the second wave finally broke, the camp was quiet, except for the crackle of flames and the groans of the injured. Ethan's arms ached, his ears rang, and his throat was dry. But he saw the look on the Earth soldiers' faces. They were tired, but their eyes still burned with fight. Jack moved through the camp, checking on everyone. Lisa leaned against the barricade, breathing hard but still ready. Ben sat beside his gun, reloading for the next round. Claire wiped her hands and went straight back to work. Ethan realized something then. It wasn't just their skill or strength that made these humans feared. It was the way they refused to stop, the way they stood together no matter the odds. And as the horizon began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, he knew the worst was still coming. The pale light of dawn revealed the damage from the night. Barricades were cracked, crates were scattered, and the ground was littered with spent shells. Smoke hung in the air, carrying the bitter smell of burned metal. Ethan rubbed his eyes, but the ache in his body reminded him there would be no rest. Jack walked the line, speaking to each soldier in turn. His voice was low, but his presence was enough to steady them. Lisa was already checking her rifle and replacing worn parts. Ben sat by the heavy gun, cleaning it with quick, practiced hands. Claire moved from one injured fighter to another, her sleeves rolled back, her focus unbroken. Ethan felt the weight of exhaustion, but he forced himself to follow Jack to the far side of the camp. They stopped at a gap in the barricade where the enemy had almost broken through. Jack pointed to the open ground beyond. "They'll hit here again," he said. "We close it before they return." They worked quickly, stacking sandbags and reinforcing the metal sheets. Lisa joined them, carrying fresh ammo boxes. She set them down and said, "You'll want these ready. We won't get time to reload slow when they come back." Her tone was plain, but her eyes told him she expected the fight to be worse. By midday, the air was tense. Distant sounds echoed across the land. Ethan could feel the pressure in his chest. The humans didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. Every movement had purpose. Jack gathered the group near the center of the camp. "We can't wait for them to hit us again," Jack said. "We take the fight to them." There was no argument. Lisa, Ben, and Claire nodded. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Going out there meant leaving the walls, leaving the safety of the camp behind. But he saw in their faces that hesitation had no place here. Before they moved out, Claire handed Ethan a bandage roll. "Keep it on you," she said. "Someone's going to need it." Then she walked away to check her pistol. The small strike team left the camp at a steady pace. The land was open, with broken rock and scattered debris from past battles. The morning light cast long shadows, and the silence made every step feel heavier. When the enemy patrol appeared ahead, Jack raised his hand, signaling them to stop. Lisa moved to the side, finding cover behind a piece of wreckage. Ben set the heavy gun on its stand. Ethan crouched low, his finger tight on the trigger. Jack gave the signal, and the fight began in a sudden burst. Gunfire tore through the stillness, and the enemy scrambled for cover. Ethan fired in short bursts, just like Jack had taught him. Lisa's shots hit with precision, forcing the enemy back. Ben's gun roared, cutting down their advance. One of the enemy broke through the line and rushed toward Ethan. Before he could react, Ben's fire cut the attacker down. "Keep your head," Ben shouted without looking up. Ethan nodded, swallowing the panic. They pushed forward, step by step, until the patrol scattered and fell silent. Jack signaled to regroup. No one spoke of victory. They all knew this was just one piece of the larger fight. On the way back, they heard the rumble before they saw it. A larger force was moving fast toward the camp. Jack's jaw tightened. "Double time," he said. They ran, the ground shaking beneath their boots. When they reached the camp, the attack had already begun. Claire was at the barricade, firing into the advancing wave while shouting for medics. Lisa and Ben took their positions without hesitation. Ethan dropped beside Lisa, his rifle spitting fire. This wave was fiercer than any before. The enemy closed the distance quickly, forcing the fight into the barricades. Gunfire became close combat, and the air was filled with shouts and the clash of metal. Ethan's arms burned from the effort, but he kept moving, kept fighting. Jack called for a counterattack, and they surged forward as one. The enemy line broke, and the humans drove them back step by step. The ground was slick, the smoke thick, but they did not stop until the last of them was gone. As the sun dipped low again, the camp stood battered but unbroken. Ethan's hands shook as he reloaded his rifle. He looked at the others: Jack, Lisa, Ben, Claridge, one still ready, still standing. And he knew the day was far from over. Night came quickly, and with it came the cold. The camp was lit only by the dim glow of scattered fires and the weak light from portable lamps. Everyone knew the enemy would return. The damage from the last attack was clear, and repairs were rushed, but not complete. The soldiers worked with quiet urgency, moving sandbags, setting traps, and stacking ammunition. Jack stood at the center, giving short, clear orders. Lisa checked her rifle again and again, her hands steady. Ben sat by the heavy gun, replacing a damaged belt feed.
Ow.
Claire moved like a shadow, carrying water to the defenders and checking on the wounded. Ethan stayed near Jack, waiting for whatever was next. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the night air. The sound was followed by the distant rumble of boots and the faint metallic clatter of weapons. The enemy was coming. Jack didn't shout, he simply said, "Positions." Ethan ran to his spot on the barricade. Lisa was beside him, her rifle ready. "Watch the left," she said. Ben's gun was positioned just ahead, aimed toward the open approach. Claire stayed near the medical tent, but her pistol was already drawn. The first figures emerged from the dark, their shapes flickering in the light of the fires. The attack came fast. Gunfire erupted, filling the air with deafening noise. Ethan fired until the rifle's barrel was hot. Lisa's shots were precise, cutting down enemies before they could reach the wall. Ben's heavy gun roared, shaking the ground beneath them. But the enemy pressed harder than before, surging forward with a force that cracked the barricades. One section gave way, and a wave of attackers spilled through. Jack was there in seconds, his rifle flashing as he fought them back. Ethan and Lisa moved to cover him, their shots creating a wall of lead. Ben shifted his fire to protect the gap, the stream of bullets forcing the enemy to scatter. Claire dashed forward, pulling a wounded soldier out of the way and dragging him to safety. The fight was chaos, shouts, gunfire, and the sound of metal against metal. The humans fought with relentless determination, refusing to give an inch. Still, the pressure mounted. Ethan found himself face to face with an enemy who had slipped through. The fight was close and brutal, but he managed to push the attacker back with a desperate shove before firing point blank. Then, through the smoke and noise, a figure appeared at the far side of the camp. The human queen had arrived. She walked with steady purpose, her voice carrying over the chaos. "Stand together. Drive them back." Her presence was like a spark to dry grass. The defenders rallied instantly. Jack fought harder, his movements quick and precise. Lisa shifted positions to strike at the enemy's flank. Ben's gun hammered the ground with deadly force. Claire, even under fire, refused to abandon the wounded. The queen moved along the line, her calm command cutting through fear. Ethan felt a surge of strength just seeing her there. It was not just her authority, it was the way she stood without armor, facing the same danger as everyone else. The battle raged for what felt like hours. The enemy tried again and again to breach the walls, but each time they were met with steel and fire. Ethan's arms ached, his throat was raw, and his vision blurred from smoke, but he kept fighting. Finally, the attack began to falter. The enemy's numbers thinned, their advance slowing. Jack seized the moment. "Push them out!" he shouted. The defenders surged forward, forcing the enemy into retreat. The gunfire faded, leaving only the sound of boots on dirt and the crackle of flames. As the dust settled, the queen stood at the center of the camp, her eyes scanning the tired but unbroken soldiers. Jack lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Lisa wiped the sweat from her face. Ben reloaded his weapon for the next fight, and Claire knelt beside the wounded, already working. Ethan looked at them all and realized that this was more than just holding ground. This was about standing for each other, no matter the cost. And with the queen here, no one doubted they would face whatever came next. The sky was pale with the first light of morning, but there was no peace in the camp. The air was heavy with smoke, and the ground was littered with shell casings and broken gear. Every soldier knew the enemy would try one last time. The queen stood with Jack, Lisa, Ben, and Claire at the center, her eyes moving over the defenses. Jack gave his orders quickly. "This is it. They break us now, or we end them." "Stay sharp." Ethan checked his rifle, feeling the weight of the moment. Lisa was already at her post, scanning the horizon. Ben cleaned the heavy gun, his movements quick but careful. Claire stocked medical supplies, her hands moving with steady speed. The sound came first a low, rolling rumble that grew into a pounding roar. Dust rose in the distance, and then the enemy appeared in force, a mass of bodies moving as one. The sight made Ethan's stomach tighten. The queen's voice cut through the fear. "Hold your ground." The first shots rang out from the barricades. Lisa's rifle cracked with each shot, every bullet finding its mark. Ben's gun unleashed a steady stream of fire, shaking the barricade with each burst. Ethan fired alongside them, forcing the enemy to slow. The attackers came hard, their charge slamming against the defenses. The impact rattled the walls, and parts of the barricade shuddered under the strain. Jack moved quickly, plugging gaps in the line and directing fighters where they were needed most. Smoke and dust filled the air. Ethan could barely see, but he kept firing, reloading by instinct. The noise was deafening, gunfire, shouts, and the dull thud of grenades hitting the earth. Lisa moved to cover a weak spot, her shots keeping the enemy from breaking through. Ben's gun roared without pause, brass shells spilling across the dirt. A sudden explosion blew open a section of the wall. The enemy poured through, and the fight turned to close combat. Jack was there instantly, his rifle in one hand, a blade in the other. Ethan joined him, forcing the attackers back step by step. Claire rushed forward, dragging a wounded soldier out of the way before returning to her post. The queen moved along the line, her voice steady. "Push them back." It was not loud, but it cut through the chaos like a command from inside their bones. The defenders rallied, their movements faster, stronger. The fight became desperate. Ethan blocked a strike with his rifle, swinging it hard to knock his attacker down. Lisa was beside him, firing at anything that moved toward them. Ben shifted his fire to cover the breach, mowing down wave after wave. Jack ordered a counterattack. "Now, drive them out." The defenders surged forward as one, forcing the enemy into retreat. Every step was a fight. every inch earned with blood and grit. Duh. The queen walked with them, calm in the storm. Finally, the enemy began to break. Their formation crumbled, and they fled across the open ground. The defenders did not chase far, they held the line. Watching until the last figure vanished into the distance, silence fell, broken only by the sound of labored breathing. Ethan lowered his rifle, his arms trembling from exhaustion. Lisa leaned against the barricade, reloading with slow, practiced movements. Ben sat beside the heavy gun, smoke curling from its hot barrel. Claire knelt beside the wounded, her hands never stopping. Jack stood with the queen at the center of the camp. The queen's gaze swept over the defenders. "You stood together," she said. "You held the line." There was no cheer, only a quiet pride in their eyes. Ethan looked around at the battered camp, the broken walls, the tired faces. He thought of the fear he had felt when he first arrived, and how it had changed. The true horror was not the enemy, it was the unstoppable force of these humans when they fought for each other. As the sun rose higher, the defenders began to rebuild. There would be more battles ahead, but Ethan knew now that with these people, there was no such thing as defeat. He had fought alongside humans, and nothing in the universe could match their will to stand.